They were told to pray outside. They subsequently went back and was shouted at a person from the masjid. Maybe just your initial comments on that.
Definitely. This happened to my closest, one of my closest sisters, Sumaya Hendricks. As soon as that happened, she immediately sent to me the message telling me about exactly what happened and everything. And I could feel how she felt because I know her. So I wasn't happy about what happened because this is definitely un-Islamic. I am very sorry to say that, but it is un-Islamic, because when we look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, how they used to, how the men and the women used to gather in the masajid during those times. The front rows were for men, and the back rows were for the women. Both men and women used to be at the same places. Then why are we, doing things differently? This is always my point. Why can't we trace our way, the way of the Prophet ﷺ and those who were pious during his time and after his time? Why should we always try to introduce new things into our religion? Is it the matter of culture, as Sister Aisha spoke about last time? Is it what is it exactly amongst us as Muslims? Of course, some people bring the cause of the issue of fitna and all that. Yes, but are we going in line with how the Prophet and his Sahaba used to live? I really condemn that. Personally, I condemn that on a very high note, because it is totally unacceptable that women are not supposed to be in the masjid, and they have to be chased away from the masjid. And I plead to my brothers outside there to please make some spaces for the women to pray. Masajid are the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are not for anybody. And we always have to take back our teachings right. We shouldn't bring our own concepts or our own ideologies or thinkings over how to deal with the issues, inshallah.
Absolutely.
And I just want to pick up on that, because I fully agree with what you're saying. I think it is exactly what you're saying about we shouldn't be bringing new things into our understanding of Islam. And I think we need to realize that cultural ideals and patriarchal cultural ideals are some new things that we brought into Islam. I mean, new in terms of its use is debatable, but it's something that we've allowed to erode our practice of Islam. And I definitely also just think, in the videos that we've seen of the reaction, so, when men were getting physically violent and using ugly words and slurs at the women who were there.
And in the month of Ramadan.
I mean, even out of the month of Ramadan, it's just unacceptable to see that is how men think that they are entitled to speak to women or to treat women just because they feel uncomfortable with a certain situation.
The problem that I have with some of the responses that I've seen to the video that was posted online was, and I could be wrong, I'm not as learned in hadith and things like that as a lot of people are, and I'm sure as Appa is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But somebody made a comment that women should obviously be covered. That's part of Islam, but should be covered in full, as in a full parda, should not wear perfume, should not wear makeup, should not do this, should not do that, should not do this, should not that, only because the men mustn't look at the woman. But why is it the woman's duty to do that when it is the man that must lower their gaze? So you are only allowed to come to read Salah at my masjid if you do not wear jewelry, you do not wear perfume, you do not wear makeup, you do not do this, you do not do that, because I must not look at you. That is a problem that I had with one of the comments, which was apparently given by one of the learned people in South Africa. Is that true, Appa?
Can I just say something before Abba says? I think sometimes, because I've read that as well, and I think it's very unfair, which I don't think comes from Islam, because it's a man-made choice, because you can't put solely so much responsibility on women and say you're causing fitna, you're doing that, because men also have to observe modesty. That's another thing. It's our responsibility both for male and women to lower our gaze. So the burden can't always be on women, because that's one of the things that make, I'll say for myself, coming from a Christian background, that makes our families dislike Islam, because of the burdens that are put upon the women, because you're solely carrying the burdens and sins of men all the time.
I 100% agree with that.
On the last point that you have just said, that carrying the sins, this can also somehow take us to the Christianity concept, isn't it? They always say that women are the ones that carry more sins. Hence, they said Hawa alayhi salam, Eve, is the one who ate first from the tree, from the forbidden tree, and then since that time she is carrying the sin, and all the women that came after her are carrying the same sin. So this is definitely not correct, and is not acceptable. Sister has mentioned about the aura. I actually laughed, but I laughed with,
Disappointment.
Yeah, I can say that, because the women were at the back. And I'm very sorry that the uncle came from the front, go into the back, and see the woman. So who saw who? That's a question.
Because the women were sajda.
You understand? If he was concentrating on his salah, then he wouldn't have seen the woman. Then who was causing fitna there?
Absolutely.
And I think this conversation in general just speaks to the way that we are so preoccupied with making women's bodies the center of the root of all moral decay and evil in society, and the way that, as all of you have pointed out, we seem to have forgotten the way that hijab as a concept is a code of conduct for every single Muslim person. So it's not, I think even as Muslim people ourselves, even as Muslim women ourselves, we're guilty sometimes of sending out the wrong message of hijab, that it's just a scarf on my head. When actually it's an entire code of conduct in terms of behavior, in terms of how we interact with other people. The way that you dress is such a small component of it all. And yet we do such a disservice to ourselves and to our own religion when we limit our conversation and our understanding to, it's a piece of cloth that a woman is supposed to wear and has to wear, and if she doesn't wear it, she's a bad Muslim. Because that is how simplistic our thinking actually goes in terms of hijab. And exactly what you say, men seem to forget that the first part of the command of that verse is, because it's ordained by the verse in the Quran where it says, and the believing men lower your gazes, and the believing women cover, and it specifically outlines how Muslim women should cover themselves in accordance with covering their aura. And men seem to forget that part, that even if I am dressed completely immodestly, you don't have to look at me. The onus is on you to protect your gaze. I'm not your test in front of you. Your gaze is your own test. You are your own test.
I think for me this was a very touching and personal topic, because I couldn't understand why those women were not allowed to go there. Because for me, I love going to the masjid, only because that is where I first found my shahada. Had it not been me being allowed to go to a masjid, I would not have met the wonderful sisters that I met along my journey in Islam. I would not have been Muslim if I was not allowed to go to the masjid. Do you understand? I would not have had the chance to be in a space where I can praise Allah around people that we share the same common ground. Some people stay in non-Muslim communities.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're traveling. I've traveled somewhere in the Free State and you find the women's section is completely closed. And you can't pray. And when you're on the way, you don't have wudu. wudu. Where I come from in Lesotho, there is a masjid, but there's no wudu facility for women. And I asked, how is that possible? How do you come to the masjid and say, I must make wudu where I come from? Where is that? When the masjid is supposed to be a safe place for all of us.
Absolutely.
Why are the men given preference in the society? Because it is not in Islam where the men are given preference. When it comes to deen, we're all equal. But people are making their own choices. Otherwise, then everybody else women won't be Muslim because now we're not allowed to do certain things. Should Sister Miriam be traveling with her husband, she can't pray, the husband will go pray because there is no facilities for the women.
Exactly.
There's an instance in Pretoria town, there is a masjid where there's no women facility, and there's a woman, she's Nigerian, she works at a saloon close by. She literally walks into that masjid and sits at the corner, and she did that until they stopped chasing her out. Because it's either she gets back late from lunch, from work, or she doesn't pray. Which one works?
Exactly.
Because it's both those options. And she went in there until they understood. She was the only woman that walked in there and sat in the back, and she did nothing wrong because she never went and led Salah anywhere. She just went in the back as it was done in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So on that note, I would like to urge our Muslim brothers and sisters all over the world, inshallah, let's open up the places for prayers for women in the masajid. It was practiced during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we still have to carry on the legacy, inshallah. Let us not do what we think about Islam, but let's do what Islam teaches us.
We discussed the issue of the women that weren't allowed to pray in a mosque in Johannesburg. Moving away from the topic and making it more holistic, taking it worldwide kind of a thing. Aisha asked earlier on the show, is Islam a progressive religion? With that said, all around the world, the masjids are a place of community. Kids go there to play football, kids go there to play soccer. They've got madrasas there. There are women's programs that are there. Women cook for the poor and feed the poor at the masjids. For example, I studied in Grahamstown, and we would all break fast together at the back of the masjid, in the courtyard, in the Jamaat Khana. Sorry, it wasn't a masjid, but we all used to make iftar there together. And we all used to go and read Tarawih together. In a place, we live in a country where it's a non-Muslim country, it's a Western country. We often don't get to learn more about our religion. And I feel like the masjid is the place for that. The men have the opportunity to go into the masjid and to listen to different speakers, different talks, get as much knowledge as they want to. We've got to find that on our own. Why isn't the masjid a place of the community?
You know, I think, again, we need to locate this kind of conversation in talking about cultural talking about when culture and religion get mixed together, because we as South African Indians, I mean, if that's how you and I can both identify, Mahreen, for example, yes, we can say that we grew up not knowing that going to the masjid was a normal thing as women. Yeah. We weren't going with our mothers or our aunties or our grannies or whatever, with the women in our family to the masjid. We were always taught that your father will go and then he'll come back and then you'll greet your father, or he'll give you a summary of the Jummah lecture or whatever it was, right? That's how we've always been taught. And I think because we've always been, we've never kind of actively questioned it or anything. It's only later on when we realize that like you say, in other places of the world, not even, in Cape Town, which is in South Africa.
My uncle does it with his family. He's got obviously a wife, 2 daughters and a son, and they go every single night for Tarawih.
That's
and
lovely.
Eid Salah.
That's so beautiful. And I mean, it's actually sunnah, to go to the Eidgah. That's something that a lot of the time we don't get taught. And there's no restriction on praying in community. And I think, that's why we need to realize that this kind of exclusion speaks to something much more broad than just, what it is. It speaks to the way that in many aspects of community life, women remain excluded. And that is because if you keep the kind of space that we're talking about, or any kind of space, a kind of men's only space, you keep that power. It's as simple as that. You keep that kind of system in place where you are able to navigate things and decide on things to be on your terms and as you would like them as a man, which is, as we know, in line with patriarchal ideals. And then you don't have, women coming in and saying, oh, but actually you're treating me unfairly. It's unfortunately, it's all just a giant power struggle. It's all just a way of maintaining the power. And I think so long as we don't understand that, because that is the crux of the issue, and because that is the reasoning for why men think it's their place to tell you as a woman what you can and can't do, we're not going to move forward, because it's not just a mosque issue. It's not just a education issue. It's something far more deep, far more insidious. It's men saying, if I hold on to this, I have control. And that kind of goes against what we're taught in Islam, which is that we need to all be just and fair and equal to one another.
I think we also need to just say that this is not a men-hating kind of a discussion. It's something that I think a lot of women, and in the South African context, will feel. I also something that I feel that not just in the issue of feminism or women in Islam is that we need to realize as a South African Muslim community that why don't we look at the lesser of all evil? Why don't we look at the good that's coming out of something? Because it's topical, I'm going to use the issue of the masjid again, but the fact that women are khataming a Quran, listening to a Quran, being able to get information, why don't we look at the good that's happening rather than the bad? Also for I can't think of other examples right now. I had it written down, but I lost my notes. But like other examples of where we're stopping women from doing things, but you're not looking at the good that's actually coming from it. What is the lesser of the evil?
Can I touch in there with something? I think it was a topic when we had a charity. I think it was on a show I had with Julia Ali, where we spoke about the manner in which charity is being done in Islam. And when you discuss certain issues in Islam, I think we're always focusing on the issue, and we don't have a solution-based argument or discussion. So if, for instance, let's say we have a solution-based, in a manner of issues being dealt with in the Muslim communities, I, for one, say, how do you deal with women issues when you're a man? In leadership of Islam, is there women on the table? I'm not saying sitting together with the men, but I'm saying is there women that deal with issues that concern us as women? As there issues that deal with Muslims that stay in the township in certain issues. There's this fatwas that come out and whatever, but are this done guidance in the, I won't say in the times, but I'm saying in the dynamics of communities that we live in the challenges that now men have left their roles as men in the Muslim communities. Women have to wake up in the morning and work because men don't want to work, or certain dynamics. Sometimes the women have to work because times don't allow, but I'm saying roles have changed, and it is not because the women want to, but it is because they have to in order to raise their kids.